Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a surprisingly cozy yet equally fascinating corner of the Viking world. When you picture a Viking, what comes to mind? Probably a fierce warrior with an axe, a horned helmet, though they didn't actually. Were those, sorry to burst your bubble, a long ship cutting through icy waves? But strip away the battle axe and the beard and imagine them instead. Sitting by the flickering fire of a longhouse, their hands busy, their brows furrowed, not in battle strategy, but in the intricate loops of a craft most unexpected. Tonight, we're exploring what these legendary Norsemen and women actually talked about while knitting their own socks. It's a reality check that will utterly transform your perception of their daily lives. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're up for it, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always wild to see how far these tales travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sitting on a low wooden bench, the warmth from the central hearth. A welcome embrace against the biting Nordic chill that seeps through the turf and timber walls of the longhouse. The air is thick with the comforting scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint, sweet smell of simmering stew. Around you, men and women, young and old, are gathered, their hands moving with practiced dexterity. Some are spinning wool on drop spindles, others are weaving, and many, perhaps most, are engaged in the ubiquitous task of knitting or knitting binding a predecessor to knitting, involving looping yarn with a single needle, their own woolen socks, mittens, and caps. Isn't just a leisure activity, it's a vital, ongoing chore. Warm, dry feet are the first line of defense against frostbite and illness in a harsh climate. The rhythmic click of needles, the soft rustle of wool, creates a soothing backdrop to the low murmur of voices. It's a quiet hum of communal productivity. Far removed from the clang of swords or the roar of battle, this commonplace scene reveals a fundamental truth. Vikings, for all their raiding fame, were primarily farmers, traders, and skilled craftspeople. A mainstream historical fact is that textiles, especially wool, were incredibly important for survival in the Norse climate. And archaeological finds confirm the prevalence of knitting and nape-binding tools. A quirky tidbit is that while we often picture Vikings in drab colors, they actually had access to a range of natural dyes and preferred vibrant hues. So those socks might have been surprisingly colorful? Historians still argue about the exact gender division of labor for various crafts. But it's clear that knitting and textile production were widespread household activities for all, ensuring everyone contributed to the family's warmth as your own fingers work, looping the soft, undyed wool around the bone needle. Your mind wanders, no longer consumed by tales of distant lands or great battles. Instead, your thoughts turn to the mundane, the immediate, the very fabric of your daily existence. It's in these quiet, domestic moments that the true concerns, the real conversations of Viking life truly unfolded, as the needles clicked and the wool grew into protective layers. The conversations flowed, often weaving intricate patterns of their own. One of the most common and cherished topics would undoubtedly be the sagas of glory and gods. These were not just stories. They were history, entertainment, religious text, and moral guidance all rolled into one, shaping their understanding of the world and their place in it. Imagine an elder, perhaps a grizzled veteran of many raids, his hands still nimble with the knitting, his voice deep and resonant. He might recount the legendary exploits of Odin, the Allfather, or Thor, the Thunderer, battling monstrous beasts and cunning giants. Or he might tell of real historical figures, ancestors whose fame lived on through oral tradition: Eric the Red, Leif Erikson, Ragnar Lothbrok. Though Ragnar's historicity is still debated, he certainly made for a great story. These were tales of bravery, cunning, betrayal, and destiny, all infused with the powerful presence of the Norse gods. The listeners, their fingers still busy with their knitting, would hang on every word, transported from the smoky longhouse to the shimmering halls of Valhalla or the treacherous shores of distant lands. A mainstream historical fact is that the Icelandic sagas, compiled much later but rooted in oral tradition, provide invaluable insights into Norse worldview, values, and history. A quirky tidbit is that some sagas contain incredibly detailed descriptions of everyday objects from clothing styles to house construction, suggesting they were not just epic tales but also a form of cultural encyclopedia. Historians still argue about the precise degree of historical accuracy in many sagas, and how much they evolved through repeated telling. But their cultural importance is undeniable. For you knitting your sock, these sagas provide a rich tapestry. For your imagination, you picture the gleaming armor, the crashing waves, the roaring fires described in the tale. You might even find inspiration for your knitting patterns in the intricate knotwork or mythical beasts described. A young boy, knitting beside you, might whisper questions about the gods, their powers, and their weaknesses. An older woman might offer her own interpretation of a particular saga, connecting it to a family lineage or a moral lesson. Living tradition, a way of passing down history, values, and a shared identity. These conversations aren't just entertainment during the long winter nights. They reinforce cultural bonds, teach lessons about honor, loyalty, and cunning, and connect the present generation to the glorious past. The rhythmic clicking of needles becomes a counterpoint to the dramatic pauses in the storytelling, creating an intimate, shared experience. It's a powerful reminder that even in the most mundane moments of daily life, the epic spirit of the Vikings was alive, celebrated, constantly woven into the fabric of their conversations. Once the heroic tales of gods and warriors faded, the conversation would inevitably drift to topics closer to the hearth and stomach, farming and harvest worries. For Vikings, whose survival fundamentally depended on the land, these were discussions of life and death, filled with anxieties and hopes for the coming seasons. Imagine the faces around you, no longer enthralled by mythical beasts, but furrowed with genuine concern. They would talk about last year's harvest. Did the oats yield enough? The spring barley was thin, wasn't it? They'd discuss the current state of the stored provisions, how much smoked fish was left, how long the salted meat would last, the condition of the root vegetables buried in the cellar. There would be detailed debates about the merits of different planting times, the best soils for particular crops, and strategies for crop rotation, knowledge honed over centuries of trial and error. Conversations would also turn to the livestock. Is young Freya growing strong enough for calving? We lost 3 lambs to the early snow, cursed the Norns. A mainstream historical fact is that farming was the backbone of Viking society, with most people engaged in mixed agriculture, crops, and livestock to sustain themselves. A quirky tidbit is the discovery of remarkably sophisticated medieval plows and irrigation systems in some Nordic archaeological sites, revealing their advanced agricultural practices. Historians still argue about the precise impact of climate fluctuations, such as the medieval warm period or subsequent colder spells, on Viking agricultural strategies and settlement patterns. For you, knitting your sock, these conversations are intensely practical and deeply personal. You chip in with your own observations about the quality of the wool from this year's shearing, or the best way to mend a fence before the spring thaw. You hear hushed whispers about neighbors whose stores are running dangerously low, and the quiet charity offered by those who have a little more. There's a constant undercurrent of anxiety. Will the ground thaw in time? Will the summer be warm enough? Will the raids, which were often driven by food scarcity, after all, be enough to supplement a poor harvest? The shared anxieties about the harvest, the cattle, and the unpredictable nature of the land knit the community even tighter. They are not just exchanging information. They are sharing their deepest fears and their most fervent hopes. Click of the needles might even accelerate slightly when the conversation turns to particularly grim prospects, a nervous energy flowing through the group. It's a powerful reminder that beneath the veneer of fierce warriors, Vikings were intimately connected to the earth. Their daily existence, a constant negotiation with the forces of nature that either sustained or threatened their very survival. Beyond the anxieties of the harvest, the unpredictable nature of the Nordic climate itself was a constant source of discussion and a primary driver of daily routines. While knitting their socks, Vikings would frequently talk about the weathers. unpredictable fury, sharing observations, forecasts, and strategies for enduring the next storm. Imagine the wind howling outside, rattling the timbers of the longhouse, or the sound of heavy snow pressing down on the turf roof. These sounds would prompt worried conversations. The ice on the fjord is thick this year, but thin in the channels someone might observe, sharing crucial information for travel or fishing. Another might warn. I felt a change in the wind, a bitter bite from the east. A storm is surely coming. They discussed the severity of past winters, recounting tales of blizzards that trapped families for weeks or thaws that caused floods. They'd share traditional weather lore. It's passed down through generations. When the ravens fly low, foul weather's on the way. A mainstream historical fact is that detailed knowledge of local weather patterns was vital for Norse survival, influencing everything from fishing and farming to long-distance voyaging. A quirky tidbit is the use of sunstones, likely Icelandic spar or cordierite, by some Norse navigators to locate the sun's position, even on overcast days. Remarkable piece of empirical weather technology. Historians still argue about the precise impact of specific climate events like the Little Ice Age on Viking settlements in places like Greenland, but their daily reliance on weather wisdom is clear. For you knitting your sock, these conversations are not abstract, they are immediate and impactful. You might nod, remembering the feeling of the wind on your face during your morning chores, confirming the prediction of an approaching storm. You might contribute your own observations about the color of the sky or the behavior of the animals. These discussions are practical. Did we bring enough firewood inside? Is the buyer secure for the cattle? Are the boats pulled far enough up the shore? They are also a way of sharing the burden of collectively preparing for the inevitable challenges that nature would throw at them. The rhythmic click of the needles, a steady sound in the stormy longhouse, becomes a symbol of resilience, of continuing life and work, even as the elements rage outside. It's a testament to their deep connection to the environment, a constant dialogue with the forces that shaped their lives. Every shift in the wind, every cloud formation, every drop in temperature was a piece of information to be discussed, analyzed and integrated into their strategies for survival. The longhouse, though insulated against the cold, was far from isolated. Through traders, travelers, and returning warriors, news from the wider world would trickle in, providing fertile ground for discussions about rumors from far shores. These conversations were a mix of gossip, vital intelligence, and thrilling accounts from distant lands. Imagine the arrival of a merchant ship, or a small party of returning warriors after weeks or months away. Their arrival would be met with eager anticipation. As they settled by the fire, perhaps unwinding with some knitting themselves, the questions would begin. What news from the Frankish lands? Is the king of the Saxons still feuding with his lords? Did you see any gold in Russ? He would share tales of bustling markets, strange customs, new technologies, or, most thrillingly, accounts of successful or unsuccessful raids. There would be talk of the wealth of Constantinople, the exotic goods from the Silk Road, or the latest political intrigues in England. A mainstream historical fact is that the Vikings were not just raiders but extensive traders and explorers, establishing vast networks across Europe and beyond, making news from distant lands a regular part of their lives. A quirky tidbit is that archaeological finds, like Arab Durhams and Viking hordes, confirm their widespread trade connections, showing that their conversations about far shores were based on real experiences. Historians still argue about the reliability of these oral accounts and how much they were embellished for storytelling. But their role in informing and entertaining the community is clear. For you, knitting your sock, these stories transport you beyond the familiar fjord. You listen intently, imagining the grand halls of foreign kings or the glittering treasures of southern cities. You might ask detailed questions about the prices of furs in Dublin or the new sailing routes to Iceland. There would be gossip about foreign rulers, about marriages between powerful families, or about local skirmishes that might impact future trade or raiding opportunities. The conversations would shift between awe at the unknown, strategic analysis of potential gains, and simple human curiosity about how others lived. The rhythmic click of your needles provides a soothing backdrop to these often exciting tales, allowing your mind to wander across the known world. It's a window into a broader reality, a reminder that your small community was part of a vast, interconnected network of trade, conflict, and cultural exchange. These conversations were not just idle chat. They were how communities stayed informed, assessed risks, kept alive the spirit of adventure that defined much of the Viking Age. Amidst the serious discussions of survival and news from afar, Longhouse wasn't always a solemn place. As needles clicked away, the Vikings would also engage in periods of conviviality, filled with laughter, jokes, and riddles. These moments of lightheartedness were essential for morale and fostered intellectual play. Imagine a sudden burst of laughter rippling through the longhouse, startling a dozing dog by the hearth. Someone has just delivered a particularly witty remark, or perhaps a clever, often bawdy joke about a tricky situation, a clumsy neighbor, or a boastful warrior who got his comeuppance. Humor was a vital coping mechanism in a challenging world, a way to release tension and bond. Riddles, too, were popular, serving as both entertainment and a test of intellect. Someone might pose a complex riddle about nature, what has an eye but cannot see, a needle, perhaps, or a storm, and the entire group would engage. Some thoughtfully, others shouting out incorrect answers with good-natured frustration. A mainstream historical fact is that Norse literature, including the Poetic Edda, contains numerous examples of riddles and humorous verses, showing that wit and cleverness were highly valued qualities. A quirky tidbit: some Viking riddles were incredibly intricate and required deep knowledge of mythology or everyday objects to solve, acting as a form of cultural literacy test. Historians still argue about the precise nature of Viking humor, and how much of it was dark or gallows humor given their harsh realities, but its presence is undeniable. For you, knitting your sock, these moments of levity are a welcome break. You might grin as you successfully solve a riddle before anyone else, feeling a small spark of pride. You might contribute your own joke, carefully timed for maximum impact. The sounds of shared merriment, the collective groans at a particularly bad pun, create a warm atmosphere, dispelling the chill of the winter outside and the anxieties of the harvest. Even the sagas, serious as they were, contain moments of witty dialogue or ironic humor. And these lighter conversations around the hearth reflected that cultural appreciation for cleverness. It was a form of intellectual sport, a way to sharpen minds and build camaraderie. The knitting would continue, a steady rhythm, as the laughter and chatter filled the longhouse, reminding everyone that even when life was hard, there was always room for joy and connection. It's a testament to the human need for lightness, for shared amusement, for the bonds formed through collective joy. These weren't just idle pastimes. They were crucial social rituals that strengthened community and eased the burdens of their demanding lives. In a society deeply rooted in lineage and reputation, conversations about family and lineage were paramount, weaving through the longhouse chatter like the very threads of their knitting. Who you were, who your ancestors were, and who your children would become profoundly shaped your identity in daily interactions. Imagine the quiet pride as an older woman, knitting steadily recounts the exploits of a legendary ancestor. Perhaps a chieftain renowned for his wisdom, or a shield maiden famous for her bravery. These stories weren't just for sagas. They were living history, directly connected to the individuals sitting in the longhouse. Discussions would inevitably turn to the younger generation. Who would marry whom? What alliances might be formed through a betrothal? Or what lands might be gained or lost through inheritance? They'd talk about the training of the children, instilling the values of honor, courage, and resourcefulness. Family was the bedrock of Viking society, providing protection, identity, and continuity. A mainstream historical fact is that kinship, ties, and family honor were central to Viking social structure and legal systems, often dictating allegiances and obligations. A quirky tidbit: some families had elaborate family trees memorized. It's passed down orally for generations, allowing them to trace their lineage back hundreds of years, an impressive feat of genealogical memory. Historians still argue about the precise balance between individual ambition and familial duty. But the importance of lineage in daily conversation and decision-making is undisputed. For you knitting your sock, these conversations are a constant reinforcement of your place in the world. You learn about your own history, and you contribute to the discussions about your children's potential futures. You might recall a story about a great-aunt who was a skilled weaver, or a distant cousin who sailed to distant lands, connecting your own life to a broader narrative. There would be gentle teasing about young lovers, or serious consideration about the dowry for a daughter. The rhythmic click of the needles, a continuous act of creation, mirrors the ongoing creation of family and lineage. It's a powerful reminder that their lives, even in the quiet moments of domestic craft, were deeply communal and historically rooted. Every stitch in your sock is a small thread in the larger tapestry of your family, your clan, and your people. It gave purpose and meaning beyond immediate survival, connecting them to an unbroken chain of generations. Beyond knitting, the Vikings were skilled in a multitude of practical and artistic endeavors. As the hours passed in the longhouse, conversations would often turn to craft and skill exchange, sharing techniques, discussing materials, and perhaps even engaging in friendly competition. Imagine the air filled not just with the scent of smoke and wool, but also the subtle aroma of carved wood or tanned leather. Someone might be sharpening a blade, another polishing amber while you and others knit. The conversation would naturally drift to these activities. "That new axe handle, Thorkel? How did you get such a smooth grain?" someone might ask. Or, "Freya, where did you find such fine linen thread for that embroidery?" They would discuss the best woods for carving, the most durable glues for boat repairs, or the finest pigments for decorating shields. Knowledge was power and practical. Skills were currency. They shared tips for tanning hides, curing fish, or preserving meat. A mainstream historical fact is that Viking society placed a high value on craftsmanship across various trades, and skilled artisans were highly respected. Archaeological finds reveal intricate metalwork, woodworking, and textile art. A quirky tidbit: some Vikings had a form of pattern book in their minds, memorizing complex knotwork or animal motifs that they could then reproduce in various mediums. From carving to embroidery, a form of intellectual property. Historians still argue about the precise degree of specialization in Viking crafts, for example. Were there dedicated professional smiths? Or did everyone practice multiple trades? But the widespread sharing of knowledge is clear. For you, knitting. Your sock, these conversations are a continuous learning opportunity. You might offer advice on how to get an even tension in a knitted garment, or ask about the best way to clean and prepare raw wool. You'd observe others' techniques, picking up new tricks, or refining your own. Perhaps you'd discuss the sourcing of materials, where the best iron ore could be found, or which trees yielded the strongest timber. There would be a shared pride in well-made items, perhaps a subtle critique of shoddy work, though always couched politely, of course. The longhouse was not just a home. It was a communal workshop, a living school where expertise was shared freely, fostering innovation and maintaining high standards of craftsmanship. The rhythmic sounds of various crafts happening simultaneously, the soft rasp of wood, the occasional tap of a hammer, the steady click of needles created a symphony of productivity. It was a testament to their self-reliance and their collective ingenuity, proving that survival in their world depended as much on skilled hands and shared knowledge as it did on strength in battle. It might seem incongruous, but even the most brutal aspects of Viking life found their way into these quiet domestic moments. Conversations would inevitably turn to battles won, battles lost. As seasoned warriors shared their experiences and younger men listened intently, processing the realities of their violent world, imagine a group of men, hands busy with their knitting, their faces hardened by experience. One might begin to recount a particularly harrowing raid. The clash of steel, the roar of the sea, the fear and exhilaration of combat. Another might interrupt to add a detail or correct a point of strategy. They wouldn't shy away from the grim realities, the wounds, the deaths, the sheer exhaustion. But they would also celebrate the cunning tactics, the moments of heroic bravery and the spoils of victory. These weren't just war stories. They were lessons in strategy, in resilience, and in the harsh calculus of survival. A mainstream historical fact is that warfare was an integral part of Viking society, providing wealth, status, and a means of defending their communities. And stories of battles were central to their oral culture. Quirky tidbit, some sagas meticulously detail battle formations and individual combat techniques. Suggesting these accounts were used as a form of military training for younger generations, historians still argue about the true frequency and scale of Viking raids versus their more peaceful activities. But their impact on the collective consciousness is undeniable. For you, knitting your sock, you listen to these accounts with a mixture of apprehension and fascination. If you are a young man, these are your future lessons, a harsh preparation for the world you will inherit. If you are a woman, you listen for the details that might impact your community, the number of casualties, size of the plunder, the reputation of a new enemy or ally. There would be discussions about specific weapons, the weight of an axe, balance of a sword, the effectiveness of a particular shield. The conversation might turn somber as they remember fallen comrades, or lighten as they recall a moment of dark humor amidst the chaos. The rhythmic click of the needles, a stark contrast to the violence being described, creates a strangely meditative atmosphere, allowing the gravity of the stories to sink in. It's a powerful reminder that even in their homes, the shadow of warfare loomed large, and these shared narratives were how they processed trauma, honored heroes, and prepared the next generation for the inevitable conflicts. It was through these seemingly mundane moments of knitting that the brutal realities and the enduring lessons of their warrior culture were passed down. Even in their practical, earthly concerns, the Vikings were deeply spiritual. As their hands worked the wool, their minds often turned to the unseen forces that governed their world, leading to conversations about God's omens and fate. Imagine the fire crackling, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with the spirits. Someone might wonder aloud, has Odin truly abandoned us this winter? The salmon runs are so poor. Another might share a dream, a vivid vision that feels like an omen, and the group would try to interpret its meaning. They'd discuss the power of the various gods, Thor's strength and thunder, Freya's influence over love and fertility, Tyr's role in justice and war. The concept of word or fate was central to their worldview, an intricate web of past, present, and future that even the gods could not entirely escape. They would ponder how to act honorably within the confines of their predetermined destinies, or how to interpret a specific sign, a strange bird call, an unusual mark on an animal, a persistent cough. A mainstream historical fact is that pre-Christian Norse society was polytheistic, with a rich pantheon of gods and goddesses, and a strong belief in fate and omens as indicators of divine will. A quirky tidbit, some Vikings practiced seer, a form of Norse magic involving divination and prophecy often performed by volar female shamans, whose pronouncements would have been a potent source of conversation. Historians still argue about the precise balance of individual free will versus predetermined fate in their worldview. But the constant presence of divine and mystical forces in daily life is clear. For you, knitting your sock, these conversations are a way to make sense of an often predictable world. You might share a recent strange occurrence, seeking collective interpretation. You'd listen intently to the elders' wisdom on interpreting omens, absorbing the subtle signs that might guide your actions. There would be discussions about proper sacrifices to appease the gods, or rituals to ensure good fortune. Even the sagas, which were often recounted in these same longhouse settings, reinforced the themes of divine intervention and inescapable destiny. The rhythmic click of your needles provides a grounding counterpoint to the discussions of the ethereal and the unpredictable. It's a powerful reminder that their spiritual beliefs were not just abstract concepts, were lived experiences, constantly discussed, interpreted, and integrated into every aspect of their daily lives. From the turning of the seasons to the outcome of a battle, every stitch knitted, every conversation held, was also implicitly about the future, particularly the children's futures. The next generation was the community's most precious resource, and their upbringing, training, and prospects were constant. Topics of discussion. Imagine a young boy, perhaps struggling with his first attempt at knitting, his small fingers fumbling with the needles. His mother, knitting nearby, might offer patient instruction, while an elder remarks, "Will be strong with a sword, but nimble hands are needed for a good boat too." Conversations would revolve around the children's burgeoning skills, who showed promise as a farmer, who had a knack for storytelling, who seemed destined for the sea. They'd discuss their education, not formal schooling, but learning by doing. How to tend livestock, how to fish, how to handle a weapon, how to speak eloquently in the wing assembly. They'd consider potential matches for marriage, even. At a young age, weighing the benefits of alliances for their children's future families. A mainstream historical fact is that Viking children were expected to contribute to household labor from a young age and learned essential survival skills. Experientially from their parents and elders. A quirky tidbit. Some archaeological finds include miniature versions of tools or weapons, suggesting children learned through play and imitation, mimicking adult roles. Historians still argue about the precise age at which children were considered adults, but the emphasis on practical training and preparedness for future roles is clear. For you, knitting your sock, you listen to these discussions with a keen ear, knowing your own children are or will be at the heart of them. You might offer observations about your daughter's talent for weaving or your son's eagerness to learn knot tying. There's a shared sense of responsibility for the welfare of every child in the longhouse, a collective effort to nurture them into capable, honorable adults. They discuss the importance of instilling values like honor, loyalty, and courage, and the practical skills necessary for survival in their demanding world. The rhythmic clicks of the needles become a metaphor for the steady, painstaking effort of shaping the next generation. It's a powerful reminder that while Vikings were focused on immediate survival, they also had a strong sense of continuity, constantly looking forward, ensuring their culture and community would thrive. Every knitted sock, destined for young feet, was a tangible expression of hope for the future, a silent prayer for the well-being and success of their children, even in a robust Viking community. Sickness was an unavoidable reality. As they knitted their socks, conversations would often shift to sickness and healing, sharing remedies, recounting experiences, and discussing the wisdom of their traditional healers. Imagine a soft cough echoing through the longhouse, or a child's feverish whimper. These sounds would immediately draw concern and discussion. Someone might recall a similar ailment from a past winter and offer a specific herbal infusion as a remedy. They'd discuss the properties of various plants. Have you tried the birch? Bark for the aching joints. It worked for my father. And share old wives' tales about curing fevers or setting bones. The wisdom of the local healer, the Licknir, often female, would be highly valued, and their successes and failures discussed with a mix of respect and quiet apprehension. This was a mainstream historical fact. Medieval medicine was heavily reliant on herbal remedies, practical experience, and folk traditions, often intertwined with spiritual beliefs. A quirky tidbit. Some Viking grave finds include bags of medicinal herbs alongside the deceased, suggesting their importance in both life and the afterlife. Historians still argue about the efficacy of various Viking treatments, but their empirical approach to healing and their extensive knowledge of local flora is undeniable. For you, knitting your sock, these conversations are a vital exchange of communal health knowledge. You might offer your own experience with a particular poultice, or share a special recipe for a strengthening broth. You'd listen intently, knowing that this shared knowledge could one day save a life, perhaps even your own. The discussions would also involve identifying symptoms, speculating on causes, and debating the best course of action. There's a constant thread of pragmatism, what actually works. Mixed with a reliance on traditional wisdom, the rhythmic click of the needles might slow as the conversation turns to a particularly serious illness or a loss from the community, a shared moment of solemnity. It's a powerful reminder that even the strongest warriors and most resilient farmers were vulnerable to illness. Their collective knowledge of healing was as crucial for survival as their skill with a sword or a plow. These conversations were not just about curing ailments, they were about maintaining the health and vitality of the entire community, ensuring that everyone could contribute to the collective good. The backdrop to all these conversations, the very essence of the longhouse, was its sensory landscape. The constant smell of smoke and salt permeated everything, an ever-present reminder of their environment and way of life, subtly influencing the tenor of their discussions. Imagine the deep air you breathe, heavy with the rich, pungent scent of wood smoke from the central hearth, mingled with the earthy dampness of the turf walls. But also, if your settlement was near a fjord or the sea, there would be the unmistakable temps of salt, carried on the wind through cracks in the timber or clinging to the clothes of those who had recently been outside. This combination of smells was deeply ingrained in the Viking experience. Primal aroma that spoke of warmth, home, and the ever-present ocean that was both provider and threat. It wasn't just a background scent, it was part of their identity. These smells could evoke memories, the smoke of a distant raid, the salt spray of a harrowing voyage, or the comforting aroma of smoked fish drying over the fire. A mainstream historical fact is that longhouses, with their central hearths and livestock often housed at one end, would have been very smoky environments, and a significant amount of their food relied on salting and smoking for preservation. A quirky tidbit: some historians speculate that chronic exposure to wood smoke in longhouses might have led to certain respiratory issues, but also a remarkable adaptation to such conditions. Historians still argue about the precise impact of their environment on their sensory perception and daily habits, but the omnipresence of these smells is certain. For you, knitting your sock, the smell of smoke is a comforting blanket, a sign of warmth and safety. The salt reminds you of the sea, the source of vital food and the pathway to other lands. These smells subtly influence the conversations. A particularly dense plume of smoke might prompt a discussion about the quality of the firewood, linking directly to the farming and harvest worries discussed earlier. A stronger whiff of salt might shift the conversation to rumors from far shores or battles won, battles lost at sea. They evoke memories, bring stories to mind, and ground the conversations in their physical reality. It's a testament to how profoundly connected their sensory experiences were to their daily lives and their worldview. The crackle of the fire, the subtle shift in air currents, the constant interplay of these fundamental odors all contributed to the unique atmosphere of the longhouse, creating a shared sensory experience that bound the community together. Even in the most mundane moments of knitting socks, despite the comforts of the longhouse and the warmth of the fire, the long, dark, and cold Nordic winters were a period of endurance. As knitters worked, a common thread of conversation would be the collective longing for and anticipation of dreams of spring and summer. Imagine the weariness in the voices, even as they speak of hope. The endless gray skies, the biting cold, the dwindling food stores, these were the realities of winter. But woven into their conversations would be vivid images of what was to come. The first green shoots pushing through the melting snow, the joyous bleating of new lambs, the return of the sun high in the sky, warming their skin. They'd talk about the promise of bountiful fish runs in the thawing fjords, the rich, fertile earth ready for planting, and the vibrant life that would return to the forests and fields. These were not just idle daydreams, they were vital, psychological anchors providing motivation and a sense of purpose through the hardships. A mainstream historical fact is that the seasonal cycles profoundly dictated Norse life, and the anticipation of spring and summer with their opportunities for farming. Fishing and voyaging was a major theme in their daily lives. A quirky tidbit: some Viking artifacts, like small carved animal figures or fertility symbols, might have been made or displayed during winter as a way to invoke and celebrate the coming life of spring. Historians still argue about the precise spiritual or ritualistic significance of certain spring celebrations, but their underlying connection to renewed life is clear. For you, knitting your sock, the thought of spring provides a burst of energy. It might contribute your own plans, I'll mend the fences as soon as the snow lifts, or the children will need lighter tunics for the summer sun. You recall the feeling of the warm sun on your face, the sound of birdsong filling the air, the taste of fresh berries. These conversations are a collective act of optimism, a way to sustain hope through the darkest months. It's about planning, it's about preparing, about visualizing a future that is brighter and more abundant. The rhythmic click of your needles, steady and persistent, symbolizes the continuous effort and patience required to endure the long wait. It's a powerful reminder that their resilience was fueled not just by strength, but by a deep-seated hope for renewal. Their dreams of spring and summer were not fleeting fancies. They were the very practical blueprint for their future survival and prosperity, constant source of conversation, and a shared vision that carried them through the harshest of winters. As the last loops are cast off and another pair of warm woolen socks is completed, you realize that the conversations held in the longhouse, far from being trivial, were the very essence of Viking life. They reveal an enduring spirit, a multifaceted reality far richer and more complex than popular stereotypes suggest. You've heard tales of gods and glorious battles, of course, but also the anxieties of a farmer worrying about his harvest, the wisdom shared about a coming storm, the thrill of news from distant lands. You've heard laughter at a clever joke, serious discussions about lineage and children's futures, and quiet counsel on sickness and healing. All of these set against the constant sensory backdrop of wood smoke and salt, were the threads woven into the fabric of their daily existence, as meticulously as the wool in their hands. A mainstream historical fact is that daily life for the vast majority of Vikings was dominated by farming, trade, and craft. With raiding being a seasonal or specialized activity for a minority, this holistic view of their lives is increasingly emphasized by modern archaeology and historical research. Quirky tidbit: the very act of sitting together, sharing stories and working with their hands, fostered incredible social cohesion. A knitted community in more ways than one? Historians still argue about the relative importance of different aspects of Viking life, for example. How much did raiding truly define them versus farming? But the richness of their domestic and intellectual world is undeniable. For you, now finishing your own sock, you feel a deep sense of connection to these people. Their strength wasn't just in their axes or their ships. It was in their resilience, their adaptability, their deep knowledge of their environment, and their powerful sense of community. It was in their ability to find purpose and meaning in both the grand sagas and the mundane task of knitting. Their conversations were their university, their news channel, their therapy session, all rolled into one. It tells us that what people talk about in their quiet moments, when their hands are busy and their minds are free, often reveals the truest aspects of their lives and values. The enduring spirit of the Vikings wasn't just about conquering lands. It was about conquering the challenges of daily life, one knitted stitch and one shared story at a time. It's a powerful reminder that history is often found in the quiet hum of everyday existence, in the mundane moments that reveal profound truths about humanity's capacity to endure, adapt, and thrive.